Welcome on to the next episode of the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. It's great to have you with us. Today, we are talking about training age versus biological age. And we've got a returning guest on the podcast today. Super excited to get him back on. But before we do that, it's a very warm welcome to the coach, Lindsey Parry. Lindsey, nice to touch base again.
Yeah, always good to touch base. And off air, I was complaining about the cold, but I see the sun just came out. So looks like it's going to get warm.
Well, I'm wearing short sleeves in Cape Town, so it's not too bad in the mother city, which is a good sign. Maybe I'm just willing that summer needs to come, and we are like living in the land of wishful thinking at the moment because I think we've got another cold front coming this week. Lots of rain heading our way and a little bit of chill. So we are making hay while the sun shines, so to speak. On today's podcast, it's a very warm welcome to a returning guest. Super excited to have him back on. He's been on the podcast before, and he's an Australian performance coach with over 2 decades of experience helping athletes perform at their best without burnout. And what sets him apart is his expertise in training age, a concept that considers an athlete's history, experience level, and adaptability over their biological age or fitness level. He's also the founder of wonderfoodsau.com. It's a great pleasure to welcome onto the podcast today, returning guest, and I think it's the first returning guest, Grant Jenkins. Welcome.
Wow, guys, what an honor. I didn't realize that.
There we go. So pressure's on. You need to bring your A game again because last time you definitely did. So no pressure, Grant. We are definitely going to get the best out of you today, hopefully. And it's a topic, to be honest, when I spoke to Lindsey about getting you back on about this topic, it's something I don't know too much about. So tell us a little bit about your interest in training age. What is it versus biological age? I think that's probably the first bit is like, what is it and where did your interest in this come from?
All right, Brad. Yeah, very good question to start off with.
So before you jump in there, Grant, Brad, you got to get this right. I think training age and biological age will have some subtle differences, but we are talking about the difference between training age and or biological age and chronological age. That's really what we want to unpack and what the difference between those are. So, yeah, as Brad said, neither Brad or I are experts at that, which is why we've got Grant on. But I do think the terminology is important and it can be confusing.
All right. So let's start with the basics. And I think that's a good clarification there, Lindsey, is the chronological age is how old you are since you're born. So right now I'm 47 years old, and that's my chronological age. And the best example that I have when I talk about training age is to really go back to sort of the early teens. That's where we can really imagine it, because you can look at any under 14 netball or rugby or whatever sport you want team, and you can see a bunch of 14-year-olds or 12-year-olds, and their chronological age will be very similar, but their maturation age would be very different. So already we've got 2 different kinds of ages there. We've got chronological, how old you are, and then maturation. Quick little story. When I was at boarding school, my first few weeks, one of my classmates, who actually became one of my good friends, in the later years of high school, I was calling him Sir because he had pretty much, he was shaving every day. And this is, a 13-year-old. And I look at this kid and I'm just thinking, he's got to be a teacher. At a boys only boarding school, I didn't want to risk not calling him Sir. And I thought I'd rather risk the humiliation of being wrong in that direction rather than the other direction. But that's what we can see, a big difference between chronological and maturation. Now, training age is very specific to the sport that you're doing. It's effectively how long have you been training for that sport? And again, we can go back to the junior ranks of sport, and you can see the kid who, again, could be 14, 15 years old, and there'll be someone who's played or competed in that sport for a number of years, and someone, this is their first season. And there'll be some big differences in terms of their skill, their perception, and their ability to read the play or just perform in general. And then obviously we're talking about the other end of the spectrum, the 50 pluses. And again, you've got the chronological age. So you can have 2 50-year-olds, and one could have continued training his entire life, and the other one could be starting. And although their chronological age is exactly the same, their training age would be vastly different. And the way we coach them and train them, and the way they train themselves, should have a very, very different approach.
Grant, that's awesome. I think let's, if we can, adapt that to running. So we're talking 50-year-old plus runners. What sort of things should someone who has trained their whole life versus someone who hasn't trained their whole life? Are there differences in the way they approach their running? What are some of the things that they need to be cognizant of?
Okay, a very good question. And probably the simplest way we can look at this is understanding that if we go back to first principles, we're an organism. We're applying a stress and we're hoping to get a response. So that's coaching, training, and so forth. Nothing really changes from that point of view. When we're looking at the training and we're looking at the organism is made up of different tissues or systems. So for example, we've got the skeletal system, we've got the muscular system, we've got the vascular or cardiovascular, we've got the neural system. And Brad, one of the key things is each of these systems adapt to the stimulus at vastly different rates, vastly. And an example I often use is, imagine the three of us are going to throw with our opposite hands. I'm right-handed. Imagine we're going to throw left-handed. My first left-handed throw of a cricket ball might be 10 meters. And then within a few throws, I could maybe get it to 15 meters, maybe even 20 meters. And that's my nervous system adapting. And it adapts literally that in seconds or minutes. It can make some big improvements. But there are other systems, for example, the connective tissue, our tendons, our ligaments, our meniscus, that take a lot longer. We measure those in weeks, months, even years. And then we've got our skeletal system, which even, is probably even longer than that. And so all these systems adapt at different speeds. And this is what's key, especially for our over 50s. And kind of we'll come back to training age specifically. But if you apply a stimulus, let's say, hey, I want to run 5Ks three times a week, something simple, just go through that. What they'll find is their nervous system will adapt pretty quickly. Within a week, there'll be a big increase in blood plasma volume. So cardiovascularly, they'll feel like, wow, I'm pretty fit. I'm improving. My time's improved from, 30 minutes down to 28 or something. It'll be a big jump like that within a very short time. But our connective tissue and our bones are lagging behind that, and they're taking strain. And while we are training, typically, there's a big mistake we make. Typically, we'll train at the rate of the fastest system or the fastest adapting system. And that's not the way to approach it. And then what happens? 6, 8, 12 weeks down the line, we've got maybe a stress fracture. There's a really bad case scenario, but ITB issues. We can have tendinopathies. We can have Achilles problems. That's because we're training at the rate of how we felt, and it's probably neuromuscular and cardiovascular, not on the slowest adapting tissues. And so that's where training age can really come into play here, because in the example we use, the runner who's been running all his life, those systems have adapted slowly over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Their skeletal system can handle the stresses that are imposed on that 5K running on the road kind of training, or those forces. Whereas the other person could run the same time in a very short training period, but there could be some long-term injury potential there that could be quite common.
Cool. Lindsey, you got a question for Grant on this?
Yeah, I do, because this is it's a complicated topic at 50, because we have to work on both sides of the bell, okay? Because we've got on the one side of the bell, which Grant outlined there really nicely, and that's the person who wakes up in their late 40s, early 50s and realizes they're just really unfit and unhealthy and want to see their grandchildren grow old, or were fast college athletes and now I've got a bit more spare time, so I want to run a faster 5K. But on the other side of that coin, we've got people who've been running well their entire lives. And to be honest, I fall into that category. I have not stopped running since the age of 5. Okay. But now, 48, I am struggling. Like, I just cannot do what I used to be able to do. And to be honest, even having tapped off, all the things that we we help other people with. I'm literally battling with them now. So that's when training age has almost the opposite impact. It's like you've got a 40-year training age. So your chassis, I mean, my bones might be stronger than any other human my age. But yeah, the body starts to break down, hormones start to have an impact, and you kind of, and that's why we're talking about this, that you kind of get to 50 where this training age, biological age, and chronological age all come together. And then it's trying to meander your way through this so that you can still enjoy yourself. I think that's the most important. But second, you might still have some performance goals, like one last 3-hour marathon that you want to do in the background.
Yeah, Lindsey,
Like, how do you consolidate that side of the coin?
okay, so we need to have some hearth truths. Right now, where I'm sitting is in my office at the gym, where I consult. Mainly now, I've kind of left that elite space, and I'm working with a lot of moms and dads. So exactly people that you're talking to, and I have to have this conversation. Yes, we are slowing down. So one of the key things that we know as we age is, especially if you've kept your training up, there's a very good chance you can train on a one-off session as well or as hard as someone who's in their early 20s. You can often do that, but our recovery processes slow down. So while they might bounce back up the next day and repeat it, we could take 24, 48, 72 hours. And we have to acknowledge this. It's a tough one. If I can just tell you a funny story. Sitting in this exact office, I had a gentleman across from me, this a couple of years ago, told me he was a lifelong soccer player. Lifelong. He was a guy, he's in his mid-50s, lifelong soccer player. I'm looking at him and think, mate, your body shape is not matching what you're telling me. So I started asking him a few questions. Turns out the last game he played, the last match he played, was over 10 years ago. But in his mind, he was still that person. And the reason I tell the story is, especially with my male clients, females, not so bad, male clients, we still think we're that 19, 20, 20-year-old, 21-year-old athlete, whatever happened back then. And guys, the reality is masters sport starts at about 30. Okay. And the reason we have that category 30, 35, 40, 45, and so forth is because we cannot compete at those levels. And so, Lindsey, your training age, yes, there's a really interesting point, and it's going to be hard to give the listeners some black and white here because there's a lot of gray. You've got an exceptional training age, but fact of the matter is you've got a really reduced recovery relative to 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and definitely 20 years ago. One of the things, and guys, I'm going to use this as an analogy, and I know this is more for runners, but I'm going to use this as an analogy because this is how we've applied this in real life. I worked with rugby union for a long time, and what I used to do is I would map out the average age of the players that I was training, and I'd form that bell curve that Lindsey referred to earlier. And I would I would design my training for that sort of peak of the bell curve, the 80%, 85% of the players. And then as they deviated further to be older or younger, they got less and less training. They got less training when they're younger. So those 19, 18-year-olds who were looking for their first training contract, their first full-time training contract, they did less because their training age was less. The guys in their 30s, sort of really, I'll be honest, it started about 27, but as I got into in those early 30s, they did less. Even though their training age was higher, their recovery was slower. So yes, what you talked about there's two things to balance: is your training age, and that's one critical part of the equation. But then our age, we just have to admit that we will not be able, if you can perform better now than you could 5 years ago, that's not so much a testament of what you're doing now. It's a testament of how poorly you're performing 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think the reason why I wanted to kind of shift that conversation there is because it's very slow and then it speeds up. and you actually think there's something wrong with you. And so off I go to the cardiologist, off I go to the pulmonologist, off I go to the gastroenterologist, and I literally had a checkup from head to toe. And the cardiologist wants to take photographs for the textbook that he's working on. He calls the cardiologist from across the road over and says, "Dude, you got to come and see this."
And in a
So,
good way, not
yeah.
in a bad way, Lindsey. Like, you need to clarify that.
No, this in a very good way. And it was particularly funny because he just spent, I honestly swear, he spent 10 minutes giving me this lecture about how much cholesterol he's going to find and all the things he's going to find wrong with me, because marathon runners think we're so healthy, but we're actually ruining our bodies. And then he was blown away. So and that's to Grant's point, is like everything is in tip top shape for a 48-year-old.
Yeah, and that's the key.
And that's that is the reality that you have to sit with. So look, obviously recovery plays a key role. We talk about that so often on the podcast and in all our channels. So I want to kind of actually steer it then in three kind of ways. So firstly, there must be some pure training adaptations we can make that can slow that process down. We know we need more time between hard sessions. That you've kind of made quite clear. And then there must be, and this is another area that you are strong in, so that's why I'm going to dive in there. And that is, there must be some nutritional changes we can make to kind of slow down the slowing down when we're not ready to quite slow down yet. So I think kind of maybe let's talk about those two things now. Is what are some of the training adaptations we can make to to kind of optimize where we are now, and then let's then shift that into the nutrition space.
If you don't mind, can we start with the nutrition stuff? Because
cool. No, you go.
And I need feedback from you guys, because I've got this really bad analogy that I'm working on, and I haven't nailed it. But if you imagine that we're younger, so a 20-year-old, and the analogy is walking along a road, and the road's taking us in the direction we want to go, and the road is really wide, so you can wander on this road, and the wandering is becoming a vegan or going out and eating McDonald's before a race or picking up some KFC, and it's just not looking after your body in any way. But you can still keep moving forward and you can still keep making progress. And then pretty much in 5-year increments, as we lose muscle mass, as our metabolism slows down, as our recovery slows down, that road narrows and narrows and narrows until such a point that you actually have to be on the straight and narrow. Everything has to be dialed in for you to optimize your performance. And we keep using the word optimize, not maximize, because that maximum, that ceiling as we age is just dropping lower and lower and lower. And the best that you can hope for is to just touch the ceiling, get as close to the ceiling as possible, because you're not going to be able to beat those times or those distances from before. And so that's my analogy. And yes, so when it comes down, we have to look after nutrition so much more. Our recovery has to be on point. And that's the best that you can hope for. But you have to understand that all your numbers are going to shift in the exact opposite direction that that you wanted to do. But here's a cool thing. And Lindsey, I love that story about the cardiologist, because if we start looking at comparing, there's a guy on social media. I just love his stuff. We've interacted quite a bit before, and he talks about he's more at 100-meter sprinting level. He's 65 years old, and he ran something like an 11:2 for 100-meter as a 30-year-old, which is quick, but you're not going to go to the Olympics or anything like that. And he's managed through very intelligent training. Now 35 years later, he's running like a 12:5. But what's happening is, while he's not getting faster objectively, he's moved from, becoming third at regionals in the UK to then becoming like a national level champion to now he's close to a world record holder, because he's is mature enough to understand that he shouldn't be comparing himself to a 20-year-old. He should be comparing himself to his peers. And just by holding on and doing all this right stuff, he's still getting slower, but relative to his social group and to his, to his goals, he's now a world-class athlete in the 65s.
So sorry, Brad, I'm not giving you much chance here, but I am finding this quite interesting. So on a very practical level, because the nutrition stuff, I definitely left my 4-lane highway open for too long. Okay, so now I'm on a one-way. Now I'm on a one-way single track through the pine forests. I have got no wiggle room. Got no wiggle room left. But I'm trying to use an app to help me out, and I find that the food targets absolutely unrealistic. I mean,
In what way?
I've only tried to hit the target seriously once. So I've just kind of been going about my how I eat normally, but making smarter choices and logging everything. Okay. And now I decided, right, let me try and do what this app is telling me to do, because I'm assuming the app's taking my age and it is taking my exercise into account. But I've only one day where I've actively tried to hit the number that it gave me. And by the time I went to bed, I thought I was going to have to go and throw up so that I could get comfortable enough to sleep. I literally felt like an earthworm burrowing through the soil and eating all day long. So some practical advice around that, and are these kind of apps just doing the bell curve again and not taking our age into account, and how should we adjust for that? But just a few practical tips for the people listening.
If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsey and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
All right. Now, this might be hugely unpopular listening to the audience, but for your listeners, but I'm going to start from a health basis, because let's differentiate. Eating for performance and eating for health are actually quite separate. Like, they're not as closely linked as we'd like them to believe. And if you look at some of the diets of elite athletes, especially younger ones at the pinnacle of their career, you could argue that that's not the healthiest thing to do. So when it comes to health, I think of our 3 macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, and fats, from a health perspective, protein is the most important. It's the one that's going to help with recovery, with bone, with brain, it's the most important. In fact, we know this, and I don't want to really get into this space, but if the 3 of us never ate another carbohydrate in our lives, from a health perspective, not talking performance, from a health perspective, we'd be fine. Our body can produce carbs and stuff. They're essential fatty acids, so we'd have to eat a few of those. But protein's the most important. And so one of my recommendations is that people develop what I call a protein lens. When you look at your food, ensure that you're nailing that first. Because especially from a running perspective, where you are moving your own body weight, if protein's arguably the biggest driver of hunger or lack of protein. So if you nail that, you will typically eat fewer calories over the day. And they've done plenty of studies where people have eggs for breakfast or whey protein or something like at the beginning of the day. And then you adapt that for the rest of you adjust to that for the rest of the day. And so that would be one of my key things to be able to do, is make sure that you're getting your protein content. And from that, then I become very, very flexible. In fact, one of my most favorite sayings to my clients is, once you nail the protein, the rest becomes details. If you want to be fat adapted or keto or whatever, go for that. Nail the protein first. If you think that higher carbs and sugars and gels and goos or whatever for your running, your riding, your whatever it is, I'm less comfortable with that, but yes, nail the protein, and you can do that too. And again, I'm just emphasizing this is from a health perspective. So once you nail that, I'd be interested, Lindsey, what did you struggle with most? Was it the total volume?
Yeah, it was just chasing calories. And what I have realized personally, but okay, I've been in this space for 3 decades, so I wasn't surprised that when I just consciously make better choices, that I nail the macro recommendations easily. So I didn't track any macros, I just chowed. And so what do they recommend? 50% carb, 30% protein, 20% fat, I think it was. And I'm 1% plus minus out. In fact, carbs was my lowest. It's like, I don't know what I was, 45% carbs. I was a little bit 1% under on the proteins and a few percent over on the fats. But all of it was pretty close without being conscious about it. But no, it was when I decided to chase the calories that they were recommending. It was like overwhelming. And I just basically, I went to bed so full and woke up still full the next morning. So
yeah. To me, I think those apps are such a, if you use them correctly, they can be really beneficial. You use them as a starting point, but as you mentioned or alluded to earlier, it's all based on bell curves. So what's the average? And the further you deviate from the average, the harder it is going to be either underfueled or overfueled. And so that's where you started as a starting point. You say, yep, I'm going to give this a crack. And then after some time, you have to individualize. And, the best coaching in the world requires some form of adaptability from the athlete or with that coach-athlete relationship. Otherwise we are talking too much cookie cutter. It's really helpful in the beginning, but as your understanding of your body you get a better understanding of your body, then you can make better intuitive decisions.
Yeah.
Lindsey, we did something at Stellenbosch back in 97 or 98 or something like that, and it was about calories and tracking and stuff. And I've literally never done anything in 25 odd years of coaching that tracked calories or macronutrients or even micronutrients. I've tried to educate the person on how to feel. And again, specifically now I'm talking from a health perspective. We will have something, we put in some constraints, for example, and I think that most adults should not be snacking. I think if you need to snack, that's an indication that you did not get enough protein in your previous meal. From a health perspective, I'm going to keep emphasizing that, guys, because I don't want to be taken out of context here. And if someone's looking at performance, then we'd have to deviate and probably have to individualize a little bit more. But if I hear someone saying something about snacks, or have a mid-morning snack or afternoon snack or something like that, do you need that? That to me is a sign that you did not get enough protein. And for someone now as a 47-year-old non-athlete, I'll maximum have 2 meals a day. Most days I'm just having 1 meal. I'm not putting in a huge amount of kilometers, maybe 15 Ks a week, a couple of 2 or 3, 4, 5K runs. And that's me. And that's enough to fuel me 1 or 2 meals a day.
So Brad, I know the last time we actually had Grant on, we said we were going to get him on to tackle nutrition in more detail. Now we've gone in a little bit more detail, but still feels like we're scratching the tip of the iceberg. And unfortunately, like, I know we are tight for time today, so you're going to be the first returning guest, I think.
Lindsey, I'm quite happy. I know we've got a couple of other pods recorded. We can push to the next one because I'm finding this fascinating. And I have a question, Grant. You're talking about not tracking calories. So I want to disagree with you with regards to tracking calories, and I'm going to use myself as an example. Okay, and again, this is for health purposes. So I've been, and a lot of the listeners on this podcast will know, I've been on a bit of a journey over the last 2 years to try and get fit again and lose some weight. And one of the things that I've done, and it's so funny because my wife has done exactly the same thing, is we've been using an app just to track calories to start with, just to see what was going in my mouth. Because I've always had weight issues growing up. I've always been overweight. And I always joke that I can look at food and put on weight. Like that is sort of the way I'm wired. And we've done nothing else. We haven't changed what we were eating. We haven't changed, like, it's not that we were eating terribly. It was just that we were eating too many calories and we weren't aware of it.
Yep.
So by just tracking those calories, I've lost over 20 kgs in the last 2 years. My wife's lost close to 30 kgs in the last two years. And that's literally not changing anything. Like, it's not that we're eating healthier, or we have just been more cognizant of what is going into our mouth. So I think there is a place for calorie counting and being aware of what's going on. Lindsey, you wanted to add something there?
Just one correction there. You haven't changed. You haven't made your choice of food groups healthier, but you have made your choice of quantities much healthier. So I just want to stress that, is that by eating in the right quantities, you in fact are eating healthier.
Yeah, correct. So it's just boiled down to portion size. Like, I have got 0 portion control. If I'm not tracking my calories, I will eat until like I can literally eat all day. And just an aside, Sir Alan Sugar in the UK, I remember seeing him on a television program talking about his tiny fork diet, and he said, like, if you just use a smaller fork, you'll probably lose weight. So that's been my experience, and for me, it's been important to track calories. So I just think it's important not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because for some people, tracking calories, it can be beneficial.
Oh, yeah, Brad. Sorry, Brad. Good point, and I'm glad you brought that up so we can clarify. I'm not saying it's bad. I've just never used it. And you used a tool to get the success. I often give people a different tool. And I think, especially on this thing with nutrition, I think there are multiple ways that you can go about achieving it. From my side, so I've got nothing against it. If someone uses it, if you came to me and said, hey, I need your help on some other aspects, I'll track my calories, I'd work with you on that. I've just never prescribed it, and I choose a different path. So there's nothing wrong with doing it. I think it can be really useful in the beginning. But my hope would be that over time, you can wean yourself off it and learn. So it's not you need it less and less. So I'll use an example. I've got a Polar watch, and it tracks my steps, and I don't use it all the time, because sometimes the steps in my mind, it becomes a thing, like, oh, I didn't hit 12,000, or I didn't hit whatever. So I'll use it for a period of time, change my habits, and if I wear it for 3 or 4 days, those habits that I change can last for weeks, maybe even months. And then I have that, and then I start to backslide, or go, you know what, I don't think I'm nailing it. So I use it as an intervention. I'm happy. The calorie tracking can be used as much as you need, but I do like to train someone to be to use their intuition as much as possible, and to develop habits that they aren't relying on an external source of measurement. And I think that's just my preferred way. And if someone comes with success of another way, I'm happy for them to continue it, or explore it as well.
Cool. I'm going to ask, just to swing back to this sort of training age, like, to go really deep into that. So, Lindsey, I want to bring you in here too, because you've got lots of experience with this, and I'm thinking specifically one of your clients, Jackie, who only started running in her early 60s and has been phenomenal. And you talk specifically of people starting later on and not having the wear and tear on their chassis, as Lindsey alluded to. For somebody who's been a lifelong runner and is, like Lindsey, now almost, I don't want to say plateauing, but you get to the point where your performance, like, to improve is really difficult, if not impossible. Whereas you find somebody who started later on in life, the gains are still there. So the motivation is, obviously, it's exciting. I'm getting faster, even though I'm in my 50s, 60s, possibly 70s. How do you balance that enthusiasm, somebody who hasn't trained their whole life, doing too much too soon, versus someone who's trained their whole life and is just super frustrated that they're not getting the results that they want?
Brad, very simply, it comes back to extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation, sort of the outward stuff, and your intrinsic is more inward. And so for both, from day one of my coaching philosophies has, let's focus more on how you feel rather than your time, your position. So a very, very basic example is, I will tell any athlete that I'm training, and this is regardless of age, I kind of don't care about your result. I don't care if you came first, second, or third. I don't care if you got a top 10, because you've got almost no control over that. The control is who's in your race at that time. So if you've got world-class athletes, maybe top 50 is amazing. So I don't like to focus on that. And then typically people start focusing on their time. So I did a 5K in this time, a 10K in this time. I don't even like focusing on that, because we know that those times can be based on the route that you're running. It can be based on the humidity, it can be based on the temperature. If we look at the central governor theory, those things are going to affect your time. I wouldn't say as much as your training, but it has a big impact. So I'm trying to focus on, can you stick to the race plan? Can you, how do you feel at certain times? Can you make intelligent decisions? So we really bring it back to those sort of first principles of what you can control rather than what you see. And so that Jackie lady, yes, and she's going to be super, super excited. But I bet you we could get Lindsey to be really excited if he, I don't know, goes for a hard run and wakes up the next morning and feels good, and he focuses on that kind of stuff, or he can back up, or so the problem is, what happens is, especially when we're winning or we on that upward trend of improvement, we're focusing on those extrinsic things that we soon find out after 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, maybe you're lucky and it goes a little bit longer. When those muscles are making improvement, the nervous systems make improvement, your cardiovascular systems make improvement, all that kind of stuff is, you're focusing on those extrinsic rewards. And it's time, and so as soon as possible, I'd be trying to make sure that they're focusing on the intrinsic rewards as well. So we've got that to rely on, and that will underpin performance and underpin a commitment to training over a much longer period of time.
Yeah, and then Brad, I think we just have to acknowledge, like, we always preach this, like all practitioners. I'm not even talking about just Coach Parry. All practitioners preach this, that individual humans are individual, and now we've got this 20-year gray area where we've got people who are just starting out, people who've been doing it their whole lives, people that have got a decent training history. So they haven't been doing it their whole lives, but maybe they've been doing it for 5 or 6 years. So now they've got this, like, a pretty good training age, but they probably will not probably they're still going to recover a whole lot better than me, who's been doing this since I was 5 years old. And that's kind of where Jackie's the amazing example. It's like, she started running in her 60s. So now that she's in her 70s, she's not the same as someone who started in their 30s. Yes, she's also slowing down, but she's not slowing down at as fast a rate. And one of the things where she is way ahead of her peers is this recovery. And so you've got to track your recovery against other people. She's just had an op. And I mean, the doctors are treating her like she's 80, which is okay, because they want to be conservative and make sure that the op is successful. But meanwhile, she's tracking ahead of most 45-year-olds. Okay,
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful. And I think I like Grant's point way early in the conversations. You've just got to be really honest where you are, how you're feeling. And you can't override these things, because if you override them, you're going to get slower faster. That's guaranteed. And you're just not going to enjoy it. You're not going to enjoy the process, because you're always going to be sore. You're always going to be tired. It's going to start impacting the rest of the things that you're trying to do negatively, your engagement with family, friends, children, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think the honesty is super important. Because the honesty will then help guide you how you can modify. And that honesty goes into, we haven't touched on sleep, we're not gonna, but the honesty has to go into my sleep cycles, into the nutrition. How's the nutrition impacting the sleep, and vice versa? And then the modification of your training, so that you can still slow down slower than the people around you, because that's the best we can hope for now, is we slow down less. If you're a competitive person. I mean, if you're not a competitive person, no, that's not true. You can still be a competitive person, but you can shift it. And that's where I also really like that's kind of analogy for Grant. If you're still into your half marathons, you know, how do we approach the first 5K, the second 5K, the third? And then when we analyze, it's not so much about the actual physical numbers, but it's how you felt, how in control you were, how were you in the last 3Ks? Could you barely recognize your mates, or were you still feeling good and enjoying the finish? So yeah, I think that's kind of just really, again, to stress that we are all different. And of course, the proper A-typers that are listening are now immediately shoving themselves into the I recover faster and this age. That's not the point here. The point is to really take note of how you are feeling, and just accept it, and then work with what you've got. And I am going to close it out with an analogy of my daughter. She's just come out of a cast after breaking her arm, and she said something about rehab, and the doctor said, no, you are not going to do rehab, and he said, and I know that's ridiculous for your father to hear because of the background that he comes from, but we get two types of people. You get people that I have to hold back because you want to go to parkour today, because she broke her arm doing parkour. Cast is off. She wants to go back to parkour today. Says, you are not going to parkour today. Here is a squeezy ball. You're going to squeeze this ball, and you're going to get back to your normal life, and you are going to be fine in 10 days' time. Said, but if you were a different kind of person, and I could see that you were someone I needed to get this arm back to normal functionality, I would have sent you to a buyer. And again, that's just knowing your person, being honest about where they are and what they are going to do when you leave them. That doctor knows that if he told Ella she could go and swim, that Ella would go and swim 100 lengths. So he knows he'd have to say, you can go and swim, and you can do 5 lengths. Okay. And then that's how you start and build up.
This gene must run in the family, Linz, because as you were telling the story, I'm thinking about the story about your dad going to the doctor after Comrades, where the doctor said to him, put him in a cast, because he knew if he didn't put him in a cast, and there was actually nothing wrong, he didn't need a cast, just put him in a cast because he knew if he didn't, he would have been out there running the next day. So this gene must run in the Parry family. There's no doubt.
Yeah. And guys, you know, one thing, and I don't know if this is the time to bring it up, but two very big predictors of injury are age and previous injury. And this is one of the downsides of, you know, if someone has a large training history or training age, almost by implication, they're going to have acquired more injuries over time. So your Jackie, athlete, she might actually be in quite a decent position in terms of not being what's the word? Not being inhibited or whatever by a bunch of age. And there's not a reason not to train. I'm just saying that, you know, if you're 50 and you've had 30 years of training history, there's a good chance you've tweaked your hamstring a number of times, you've done your calf, you've done this, you've done that. So there's that also, that's sort of side of the coin to balance out. But I think long story short is we just have to be honest that we are not going to perform. And if you are making improvements over the age of 50, it's because you started late, you started from a really low base. Enjoy those improvements, know that they're not going to last, and just be honest with yourself and just make sure that you can keep training for years, not 6 weeks.
Yeah. It's not always about performance. It's about longevity, and we spoke about that last time you were on as well. And making sure we're doing the right things to keep us running. Because yes, we love running fast and we do want PBs, but the reality is it's not going to happen forever. But we want to make sure that we keep moving and running until we're 60, 70, 80, 90, until we keel over. I think that is the plan for everyone. Grant, if people want to find out more about you or get in touch, how can they reach out?
Wonderfoodsau.com, literally the worst website URL you can possibly imagine, because it's wonderfoodsau, then it's .com. Reach out there. You can check out our supplements. You can there's a place to chat. You can answer pretty much everyone. I think I answer everyone who sends in a question. So that'll be the best place, I guess.
It's going to be my new hobby. I'm going to be sending Grant like weird, what's the fastest land animal? Like, we'll just send you like weird requests, I think. Cool. Grant Jenkins, as always, great to catch up. Thanks for your time. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolute pleasure, guys. Always good to chat.
Thanks a lot.